Hey there, my fellow designers and creatives. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to a two-part series on creating the Duolingo slider animation. So let me quickly take you through what we're going to be creating, and I'm going to explain a couple of things on how all of this is going to work, and then we can get started with this video. So as you can see, I have an animation over here, basically the slider interaction, and we're going to be creating two versions of this. The first one is where we want to be able to match the slider to the exact value, and the second one is we're going to put this into a range. So for example, if I click here and drag on the slider, you can see that I can drag to a certain point. And if I choose the wrong answer, for example, 82 is the wrong answer, I can click on check and I can try again, right? And then I can come back again here to probably 33. I can check and that's also wrong again. And I can come here to, let's say 60, which is the right answer. And now I can check release and now it's correct. Right? So we're going to be creating this animation. Now, to all super smart people out there who are going to say, oh, this is bad UX, this is not the way to set up a slider. I understand that, right? Definitely. That's not the objective of this. The objective here is to learn how to create a slider interaction. It's not really to solve a problem. It's just to have fun. So please put aside your super smart brain for a second so that we can focus on just learning the interaction and not always think about laws of UX and things like that, right? We're having fun over here. So this is the first version. Now the second version is going to look a little different. Now in the second version over here, as I drag, I won't be able to see the number. And as you can see, the title says get as close as you can. So now I sort of have to manually figure out where this should be. And actually this is the original interaction from the Duolingo app. So this definitely makes you think where to put the slider and not really enter the number. And again, all the super smart people who are going to say, oh no, you should be able to enter the number. That's not the objective. It's to gamify and have fun with an interactive experience out here, right? So I'm going to probably put it somewhere here, which is definitely wrong. This is the 50 range. And when I check, obviously the answer is wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and try to move it somewhere over here, which should be in the 60 range, I guess. And then now, okay, this is also wrong. All right, so maybe it should be a little bit more closer, I guess. So let's try to go a little bit more closer. And then, so now we've got somewhere in the 60 range and now we've gotten it right? So this is what we're going to be creating. In the first video, which is this video, we're going to go ahead and learn how to create this drag interaction and then assign this number to change depending on the dragging. And in the next video, you can check out in the link in the description, there's going to be a video somewhere to watch this. You should be able to go ahead and create this logic where this appears, this disappears. It checks the condition whether the answer is right or wrong. And we'll also set up two conditions where we needed to match the exact number, and the second one, we needed to match in a range, right? All right, and now here are the two QR codes that you can actually scan to view this prototype and interact with it all on your own. Make sure you have an iPhone to do this. The left one is going to be showing the one where you need to get the exact answer, and the right one is where you need to drag to get as close as you can. So without any further ado, let's get started. All right, so here is the starter file, and you can actually check this out by going to the description and clicking on the link, and you can actually access this and duplicate it. So you can follow along with me and make the interaction from scratch. So I'm also going to share a link to the final version as well. So you can sort of copy that as well and see how I've set everything up. But if you want to practice along with me, you have the free file as well. So let's get started. Now here I've set up a very simple layout. I have the top navigation, which really isn't going to be interactive. I've got the button. I've made components for all of them. So the main button is into a component, and then I've put that into a wrapper. So maybe if I bring in the layers panel, you can see that I've created a wrapper, call it the button stack. All right, very simple, nothing complicated. We're going to go ahead and customize the button and add various states and things like that. Then I've got the main content, where here I have the main wrapper, which is going to have the question, and all the numbers here are editable, so you can actually type in whatever you want. I've used the Duolingo's font, but if you don't have it, you can just use any other font that you want and it should probably work, no problem. Then I've got the slider over here, which is again a simple auto layout and nothing fancy. Now what we will do is we will take a copy of this thing called as the handlebar. And the handlebar is basically a combination of two elements. It is this bar that you see over here, which is essentially, I don't know what this is, the pointer. And then I've made an instance of the handle itself. So when I tap down on the handle, I should be able to press it. So we want a press interaction. So I'll add that to the handle. And then I've taken that and put that as an instance over here inside the handlebar. And this handlebar is basically what we're going to drag around, right? Pretty simple and straightforward. So I'm going to go ahead and just hold Option on the keyboard and drag so I can make a copy. And then I'm going to take that. I'm going to drag that inside over here. What I want to do is I want to have it inside the main content area. So it doesn't matter where exactly you put it, but I like to put it as on top of everything else, so which is essentially in the main content area. Now, of course, we want to be able to move this handlebar however we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click here to absolute position it, and that basically allows me to move it wherever I want on the screen, and it's not restricted or it's not following auto layout. Right, so I'm going to click on the bottom right for now, all right, and that pins it to the screen over here. Now, if I needed to match the height of this or basically align with this, I basically need to take this main content and I just need to drag it down so that I get more area, and then this keeps spinning to the bottom left corner, right? So let me keep doing that a little bit, all right? Maybe I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, and I think now, as you can see, it is perfectly aligning. All right. Now, of course, this is not aligning. It needs to start from 0, and we're going to look at all of that in a second. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create the drag interaction. Now, Play already gives us a preset drag interaction, but there's a problem with that. So if I go to the interaction tab and I click on the handle over here, all right, we have a section called as prefabs, and prefabs are automatic or presets that they have created, and you can just drag and drop and customize things a little bit to get the desired result. And they have something called as a drag around. So I'm going to go ahead and just double click that and apply that. Now, as you can see, I can either drag on the X, I can either drag on the Y, or I can turn on and off snap to bounce. Now, I'm going to turn off Y because we want it to move only along the X. And let me tell you what snaps to bounce actually does. So let me bring out my phone. So now I can actually drag this, and as you can see, it drags on the left and right, which is perfectly what you want, but it ends up snapping to the corners, right? And so basically what we want to do is we want to make sure that this doesn't happen. So if I can come over here and let's go back to the interaction tab, and I can turn off snap to bounce. If I bring back my phone again, you can see now I'm able to do this. However, the problem here is that when it's dragging, we want to be able to customize a lot of things. We want to set a lot of conditions, and we want to specifically update this number as I drag. We want to add haptic feedback. We want to check multiple conditions. There's a lot we want to do. Now, the thing is that we can actually do it. So if I click on this unlock button, it basically shows how they've set up the interaction with all the conditions. However, if you are on a free plan, you will not be able to view or edit any of these things, which means we have to build this interaction from scratch, and it's going to be a little different than how they've done it over here. But we're going to do that from scratch so that you can completely control the way you want without using the prefab. If you have the paid, you can use the prefab and you can customize a couple of things to make it work. But we're going to go ahead and build it from scratch, assuming that most of the people, or pretty much 99% of the people watching this video, will not have a paid account. So let's go ahead and figure this out. Now, as you can see here, one of the most important things is that they're using a trigger called as the pan, and pan essentially means drag. It is not scrolling. It is basically panning, where you're dragging something on your screen, right? So this is one thing that to keep in mind. So I'm going to start off by deleting this prefab, and we're going to build this from scratch. Now, to understand a little bit about how we're going to do this, I'm going to go to Figma and explain a little bit about the concept. So I've created a simple storyboard, and I'm going to explain what's happening over here. So let's say this is the width of our screen, the entire gray area, and we have this element on the left, all right? And now what I want to do is I want to drag this element. So as I'm dragging, as you can see here, this is just a visual representation that it's being dragged. And then I release, and then this becomes the next position. And then I can drag left again, and then it moves from right to left, and then I leave it. Now, this is pretty much how the drag interaction works. But the way we want to set up the logic is written over here. What we want to do is we want to record every action that's happening. So the first thing that we'll record is basically where is the initial position of this particular element on the screen. And at this point, the screen is our parent element. So this is actually 0 pixels from the left of the parent. Now, the most important thing to understand here is that the anchor point, or where is the center of this particular box. If I open up the inspector panel, if I click on the box over here, you can see here that the position is actually 0, which means that it's taking this left edge as the starting point. So since the left edge is touching the edge of the screen, the value is 0. And over here, you can see that the value is 150, which is the X position, because I've moved it by 150 pixels, right? So what we will do is we'll only look at the left side of the particular element and how far it is away from the left of the screen. So in this case, this is 0 pixels. So we're going to record this initial position as 0 pixels. Then we will drag the element and move it depending on how much I am dragging on the screen with my finger. So if I'm dragging 150 pixels, I want the box also to move 150 pixels, which makes sense. And then we're going to go ahead and register that position. Now, things can get a little complicated and you might be confused why we are doing this in this order. So let's scrap all of this and start from scratch. All we're going to do is we're going to focus on making this move as I move my finger. This is supposed to be super simple and straightforward, right? We'll figure out everything else as we go along. So we're going to start step by step and then we're going to update and fix things as and when we find problems. So I'm back here in Play. And what we will do is in the interaction tab, I'm going to go ahead and press A on the keyboard to bring up the search area. And I'm going to search for pan, right? And pan is basically what we want to do. Now we have a couple of options, which is when the pan began, when the pan changed, when the pan ended. All of this might be confusing. Let's just go with the default called any. And if this doesn't work, then we can choose something else. And the direction here, I'm going to choose left and right because obviously we want to be able to drag it left and right, all right? Now, the question is, what should happen when I start dragging? All right, let's say I drag right, what should happen? So here, I'm going to choose something called as set property. And what we are basically doing is moving the position of this particular element, all right? And so here, the target is self because we want this particular element to move. And the property, we can customize any of the properties. As I drag to the right or left, what should happen? What we will choose is this thing called as offset X. And this is how much is it moving from its initial position, all right? Now the question here is what should be the value? Because if I add a fixed value, then it doesn't make sense because if I add, let's say for example, 100, then it's only going to move by 100 pixels. Like I should be able to move as much as I want, right? So how do we tell Play that, hey, don't use a fixed number. This value should change as much as I drag on the screen. So what we will do is I'm going to click here to reset that. And we're going to add an expression. Now here, we're going to add a little bit of code. It's not really that complicated. There are certain ways to do things and we just have to follow that, right? So what I will do is I'm going to type in the word trigger. And as you can see, the first option is trigger. And I'm going to tap on enter. And then that changes to pan. So basically, this is the trigger, which is basically panning. And I'm going to tap on dot. And here, I'm going to choose translation X. Now, as you can see here, it says the horizontal distance of the pan, which is left is negative, right is positive, right? This is basically how much I am moving. So I move to the left, I'm moving negative pixels. If I move to the right, I'm moving positive pixels. So I'm gonna go ahead and just select that. So now basically what's supposed to happen is as I drag, the value is going to be the amount of the pan, which is exactly what we need. So if I bring out my phone again, now I'm going to drag this, and now as you can see, it's dragging as much as I want, all right? And if I remove my finger, it stays there, all right? However, if I start dragging again, you can see it jumps to the beginning, right? Because that was the default position. And this is not something that we want. We should be able to understand and tell Play that, hey, now there is a new position, right? Because what is happening here is this is only dragging. It's not storing any information. It is not telling what is the initial position, what is the end position. It is just dragging. And when the animation is over, it doesn't know what it's supposed to do. So it's just going to reset and start again from scratch. Now, that's why we need to introduce this thing called as initial position and new position. Now, how is this going to work? It's basic math at the end of the day. What we need is the initial position. So we need to register that when the animation starts or when the dragging starts, what is the initial position, right? And that we're going to calculate based on the distance from the left of the parent, which is the screen, and the element, all right? And so here the initial position is 0 pixels. But if the box is over here, let's say, the initial position is actually 150 pixels, all right? So let's say we start from this. So I drag from 0 to 150 pixels, all right? And now I've dragged by 150 pixels. Now what I want to do is I want to tell, hey, now that you have dragged by 150 pixels, the new position is supposed to be the initial position plus the amount of drag that I have done. So that is essentially 0 plus 150, and that becomes the new position, all right? And I want you to store these numbers and I want you to know what is happening in the background. So let's go ahead and set all of this up. So I'm gonna come back to play and I'm gonna go ahead and create a new pan, all right? Now the reason I'm creating a new pan is because I want to actually store the initial position the moment I start the dragging. Because at this point, it can store the initial position at any point. As I'm dragging, it can store the initial position. But I don't want to do that. The moment I start the dragging animation, I want to capture the initial position, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start and change this to began. And here, I'm going to go ahead and say set variable, all right? Now, because what we're doing is we're just storing the numbers in the backend. Visually, nothing is going to happen, but we're going to see all of this information in the backend, all right? So I'm going to create a variable. Now, we don't have a variable, so we're going to go to the variables section over here, and I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to create it in the global, all right? And I'm going to go ahead and choose the number variable because we are storing a numerical value. And here, I'm going to go ahead and call this initial position, okay? So I'm going to select this and I'm going to say initial position. Now, by default, it set that to 0. Now, in this case, it's correct. But as I keep dragging, the initial position can change. So if we add a fixed value, then this initial position can never change. So we should be able to change that. And what is the initial position that we want? The initial position that we want is basically how far away is it from the left of the screen, right? So in this case, the initial position is 0. In this case, the initial position is 150. In this case, the initial position is 90 pixels. So the way to do that is by using a little bit of code. The first thing you always want to do is identify the element and then apply the property to it. Just the way we do over here, we identify the element first and then apply the property and then the value, of course. So here I'm going to go ahead and type in self, and that is basically going to target the element that this is applied to. And I'm going to say dot, and now I have a bunch of options that I can choose, all right? What I will choose is this one called as left. And as you can see here, it says it is the position of the object's left edge in relation to its parent's alignment. All right. Now, in this case, the parent is not the screen. The parent is this main content wrapper, but it doesn't matter because it's taking up the entire width. It is as good as just using the screen. All right. So I'm going to click on this and say left. So now it's going to capture the value from the left side of the screen. All right. Great. So we did the first step, which is we captured the initial position. And then we've done this, which is the second position where we are identifying how much it is moving. And now we want to do is capture the final position. And that final position is going to be a combination of the initial position plus how much I have moved over here. So I'm going to go ahead and say set variable. All right. And now we want to store the new position. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new variable. And I'm going to go ahead and call this new position. Okay, so I'm going to choose new position over here. And now the new position is going to be the initial position. So I'm going to say hashtag initial position plus the pan dot translation X, the amount I have moved. So I'm going to go ahead and say pan dot, or actually let's type in trigger, enter dot translation X. So now we've stored the initial position. We are moving it and we are calculating the new position. Okay. Now, this is just math that is there in the background because all we are doing is updating the variables, but we are not really affecting the property of this particular element. We're just updating numbers and these numbers are just in the air. They're just in the background. These numbers are not really connected to this particular element over here. Only the movement is connected to the element because we're changing the property. But this is just a variable. A variable is not really connected to anything, right? So the first thing we'll do is we'll check if this logic is even working. Now, the best way to check this logic is because we are not connecting it to any of the elements and we're not updating any of the properties of the element. We can actually use a concept that engineers use called as debugging, and we can print the information and see the math. Because if the mathematical calculations are happening in the background, then our logic is working correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here and I'm going to type in print. This allows me to print any value that I need and see if the math is working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and type in start over here, start position. Okay. And and I'm going to choose the initial position. All right. So now when the moment the panning starts, I will identify what is the initial position, and that initial position is going to be the self.start. Now this, what you see over here, can be anything. This is just a plain text field. It doesn't really matter what it is. This is just for, and I'm just calling it start position so that we understand. Now, create a new one. I'm going to call this movement. Okay. And then this movement is going to be the trigger dot translation X. All right. And I'm going to create a new one. Now this is going to be called the end position. Now the end position is basically the initial position plus the amount of movement, and that is called the new position. So I'm going to go ahead and type in new position over here. So now let's see if this works and if the math actually makes sense. All right. So now the moment I start dragging, now you can see what happened is that it registered the start position as 0. And then the movement, as you can see here, it is equal to how much I'm dragging, all right? And the end position is basically 0 plus that value, all right? Now, when I release my finger, okay, it's registered that the end position is 155. Now, when I start dragging again, it starts from a very weird place again from the beginning. It sort of jerks, right? And that's because we haven't really told this object to register the initial position or the end position. It is only moving. This is the only property that is being affected. Now, let's check the math over here first again. Now, here it might be confusing because we have too many numbers. So I'm going to round off these values so that it's easy for us to understand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to the start position. Okay. And here I'm going to add a property called as round. And this basically allows me to, as you can see, it says rounds the value to the nearest whole number. So I'm going to enter that, and inside that, I'm going to add the initial position, and then I can delete this. All right. I can do the same thing for the pan translation. All right. So I'm going to say round and then trigger dot translation X, and then I can delete the rest of this. And then the end position also, I'm going to say round, say new position, and this. All right. Now let's try that again. So now, if I move this, now you can see we have whole numbers, which is good. So now the math makes sense. All right. So now let's say I leave it over here. All right. 150. When I drag again, you can see that the start position is registered as 150. All right. And as you can see, the movement is also increasing because the movement resets and starts from 0 every time. And then the end position is also updating. However, the object on the screen is not reflecting that. That's because we haven't really applied those properties to the element. We're just doing the math. So the math is working, but the math is not connected to the object over here. All right. So let's go ahead and map it. Now, what we want to do is we want to define the position of this particular element. So if I go ahead and create a new property, all right. And here, if I select the target and I choose the property, here, as you can see, I have the height, scale, the scale of the X, Y, offset, radius, opacity, a bunch of these things. All right. Now we have translate X, and again, translation is the amount of movement. It's not a fixed position or the actual position. And offset is also not the same because offset is the distance of it from the main thing. Here, what we need to do is we need to use a property called as set position X. All right. Now, to quickly show you what that means, if I go ahead and add in that drag, or not, let's create a new one over here. All right, let's add the prefab, which was called drag around. All right, and I open this up. Okay, and if I move a little bit over to the side and maybe here and over here, you can see we have this property called as set position X. Now, for some reason, I don't know why Play doesn't have this. Maybe they'll add it in the future, but essentially we need to copy this node. Now, at this point, because I have the paid access to Play, I can actually edit this and copy this, but you may not have it because you may have the free account. So what you can do is you can go to the description and you can actually check out my project file where I've set up all of this, and you can just copy this set position from my file and paste it to yours, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and just copy this by clicking on it and pressing Command C, and then I'm gonna delete this entire thing. And then I'm gonna come over here and paste that over here. All right. Now, there's some error over here, but that's fine. We can just click here to reset that. So now the new position is now supposed to be the end position, which is also called as the new position. That's the variable. We always want to assign variables. So you can click on this plus, click on use expression, and then here I'm going to say new position. Hey everyone, I actually wanted to share a super small update. I actually reached out to the team at Play and they explained to me that set position X is actually renamed to offset X. So you don't really need to use my project file. You can actually do this by yourself. All you need is to select set property and choose offset X and apply the same variable that I've applied over here. As you can see here, I'm showing you the final logic for the entire animation and interaction. So I've tested this and it works. So if you use offset X and set property and set the variable, it should exactly work. All right, so now back to the video. Now, let's see if this works. So I'm going to bring out my phone again. Now here, let's start again. I'm going to drag, all right? So let's say we move by 100 pixels, all right? So we moved by 100 pixels. Now I'm going to release my finger. Now I'm going to start again. Now at this point, we have set the new position to be actually 150 pixels because that is what we did here. We actually changed the position of the X to be whatever is the new position. And in this case, the new position is 100. So now when I drag again, I should be able to drag exactly from there. And now you can see the start position is 100. Now let's say I move it to, let's say 140. All right, so I moved it by 140 and the end position is now 240. So now I release my finger. So now it is stored that the new position is 240. Now when I start again, it is going to identify that the initial position is 240 and update the start position to 240. So when I move this, let's say to the left this time, now you can see that the start position changed to 240 and now I am reducing that value. So now the new position, let's say we come to over, I don't know, here I guess 150. All right. So I moved by 90 pixels and now the end position is at 150. All right. So now as you can see, this animation is working exactly the way we want. Now, of course, there is a problem, right? This point, as you see over here, all right, is actually 22 pixels because that's the end position. This ideally should be our first position, all right? So how do we do this? Now, if we come back over here and we see the way this is set up, or maybe let's come here and look at this. The initial position that we set over here is actually from the left of the screen. Now, we want two things to happen. We want the left to be 0 at the beginning, and also we want it to align to this. So as you can see over here, we have this element, which is the handle, which is to the left of the screen, but we want it to align to this. Now, if I move this, then the starting position becomes 22 or 23 in this case, or 22, whatever, right? This is not what we want. We want it to be 0 and we want to align. So the way to do this is if I go ahead and set this back to 0, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to increase the width of this element so that we match. So if I add 44 pixels to the width, right? So it is 40 right now. So if I set it to 88, all right? And let me move this a bit to the side, all right? Or actually it probably needs to be less than that. So if I can click on this, it's not supposed to be 88, probably 84. I can select that and let's just drop that to 84 or 86, whatever works. I think, yeah, not 86, 85, weird. Because if I set this back to 0, let's just set this to auto. The width is 40, which is great. So then let's add 44. So that becomes 84, all right? And as you can see here, it is not perfectly aligning. And let's see if we can fix that. Yeah, as you can see here, when we add a width of 5 pixels or basically odd values, it does weird stuff. So I'm just going to increase this to be 4, all right? And then we can select this handle as well and change the width of that also to 4 to make things a little simpler. So I'm going to set this to be 4 pixels, all right? And then I will change this one also to be 4 pixels. So click on this element and set it to 4. So now it's a little easier, right? And now as you can see, it is exactly matching that. So now this is still 0 pixels from the left of the screen and this animation is still working. So now let's check this out and make sure that this is working correctly as per our requirements. So now as you can see, Now if I start dragging, you can see that it registered the start position, all right? And now let's say this is around 150, all right? And now when I drag again to the left, it registered the start position, and now I can drag beyond. Now the problem here is that I can drag beyond, which is now what we're going to solve. But for now, this entire drag interaction is perfectly working. So now, how do we make sure that it doesn't go beyond this area and this area? Now the answer is pretty simple, but it's not really intuitive for a lot of people, and it wasn't really intuitive for me. I had to use ChatGPT to help me understand. Let's actually understand that by looking at this Figma again. What we basically want to do is every time we calculate a new position, we want to check and see what is the value of this. Now what this basically means is, let's say the width of this is around 687 pixels, right? Let's say it's 600 pixels for the sake of simplicity. We want to make sure that this box is moving only if the new position is between 0 and 600. If it goes beyond 600, we should not let it. And if it goes below 0, we should not let it go below 0. So essentially what we will do is the moment the new position calculates the value, it should run a condition immediately, and it should see, is it falling between 0 and 600? If it is, then it should move. But if it is not, then we need to prevent it. Now, how do we say that we want to prevent it? Essentially what we will do is the moment the new position gets calculated and it is a value less than 0, we should automatically just set that to 0 immediately. Like instantly we need to set that to 0. And if it goes beyond 600, we need to sort of reset that value to 600 so that if it keeps increasing, it should keep resetting to 600. So let me explain how this would work. So we'll come back over here and we're going to go to the interaction tab. And now I'm just going to go ahead and just hide all of this. So we don't need this, and we can have this, right? What I will do is I'm going to go ahead and add a condition, all right? Now this condition is going to say, if the new position, all right, is less than 0, okay? If it is less than 0, I want you to forcefully update that new position to 0. Just keep resetting it the moment the calculation is happening and then the value is negative. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say set variable, all right? And I'm going to choose the new position and I'm going to forcefully set that to 0 if the new position that is being calculated is less than 0. But what if it is not less than 0? If it is not less than 0 and if it is greater than 0, we need to check, is it going post 600, all right? So if the new position is less than 0, do this. But if it is not, do uncheck another condition. Now, is the new condition, or basically the new position, greater than 600? Now, here's the thing. We can't randomly say a number 600. I just took an example of 600 from here. But what we need to do is we need to look at the particular device because every device has a different width. So if I open up Figma over here, and here as you can see here, each of the phones has a different width. So depending on the width, it should have a different maximum value. Now, let's take an example. Now, let's go ahead and make a quick duplicate of this, and I'm going to delete all the items over here, right? And now let's say this is our width. So let's say I'm using an iPhone 13, all right? Now the width of that is 390 pixels, okay? Now, this is the initial position that we will accept, and the end is this. This is all we can accept. We were not going to let it go beyond this. So now, what should be the end value? The end value, or basically the new position, is basically 310. And how are we getting 310? It is 390 minus the width of this particular element, which in this case is 80 pixels. This is going to be a new position because it is now 310 pixels from the left of the screen. But what if we take an iPhone 16 Pro Max, which is 440, right? So if we take an iPhone 16 Pro Max, this is going to be 440. Now the new position, the max that we can accept is 360. Here it was 310 and here it is 360. So essentially we need to set a logic saying that the maximum value that we can accept is the device width minus the value of this. Now at this point it's 80, but what if it is 55? What if it is 16? The value changes over here, right? So we need to set that in code and explain to play. So Here, instead of saying a random number called 600, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in device, and I can choose properties of the device. All right. And I'm going to say device dot width. All right. And as you can see here, it says screen width. So now it is going to identify which device it is on, calculate the screen width of that, and then I'm going to minus it with the width of this element. All right. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say handlebar. All right. Choose the handlebar dot, let's try that again. Handlebar dot width. So the current width of the object. All right. So the new position, if it is more than this, and we want to put this into brackets because we are doing basic math. If the new position ends up being more than the device width and the width minus the handlebar, which is the acceptable area, then we want to set variable, all right, where this new position is going to be to a max value of device dot screen width minus handlebar dot width. Okay, this is the maximum that we can accept. We're basically doing the same thing. This is the screen width minus the value, or which is basically minus the width of this element. This is the maximum we can accept. So whether if it is an iPhone 13, whether it is an iPhone 16 Pro Max, whether it's an iPad, this is going to be the maximum new position that we can accept. All right. Now, let's see if this condition works. So I'll bring out my phone again. Let's see what happens. Now I drag it to the right. All right. We're getting the logic. All right. Everything is perfect. Now the new value is 217. Perfect. 81. Perfect. 81 here again. Okay. Now let's go and let's say probably set this to 300. Right. So let's say I set it to around, 300, and there we go, 300. All right. Now, as I increase this beyond 300, all right, you can see that I'm still able to drag, and even the end position is changing. All right. And if I drag it to the left, you can see that it's still not working, but we set up the condition. And that's because what you're seeing over here is that play is following this order. And the order here doesn't make sense. What does that mean? So play starts off with this. It has the initial position, and then we have the movement, and then we calculate the new position. And then what we do here is now the new position is calculated, and we are already setting that new position over here, and it's almost like it's over. And then we're printing this. So anything that's happening after the printing is not sort of being updated, because this print is only calculating what is happening over here. It is not even looking at the ones at the bottom. So if we move this to the bottom of the screen, all right, or maybe bottom of the screen, now it's going to run through all of this and then print the values. So now if the value goes beyond, this is going to be the new position, and then it's going to print that over here. And not just that, we also want to make sure that we check this condition before I actually set the value, because right now it's setting the value of the new position, and that's it. The new value is getting updated over here, as you can see, but this new value is not going and sitting in position X, because that is happening before I check the condition. So I need to take all of this condition and move that above, because I wanted to calculate the new position first and then run the condition. Now let's see if this works. So let's try again. I'm going to drag, and now as you can see, it's not letting me go beyond that point. All right. And as you can see here, the movement amount is still increasing. However, the end position is not. The end position is being forced at 0 because we set that condition. And if I drag it to the right for some reason is not following that approach. So let's see if there's a mistake that we did, and we can sort of try to fix it. All right. So here it looks fine. Here it also looks fine. Now let's do a quick debugging. I don't know what is causing the issue. So if I go to design mode, let's say we click on this element, the width of this is 84 pixels. Now let's see if we just set 84, if that works. So I can go to the interaction tab here, and instead of saying device.screen width minus handlebar.width, let's say I just set that to 84 pixels, and I set this also to be 84 pixels. Let's see if this works. All right. So over here, yes, now it seems to be working really well, right? So here it is capping at 306 and here it is capping at 0. Now, essentially, I should be able to change this to the particular element. So let me try again. So let's say I do handlebar dot width, and we'll do that again. Device screen width minus handlebar dot width. All right, let's see if this is working. Let's try again. Yeah, okay, it's working now. So I guess I just had to type in, maybe it was a small bug, but now as you can see, it is perfectly working. Amazing. Now what we want to do is we want to update this number to the value over here. And now this is super simple because all we need to do is this number needs to reflect the end position, right? So if I'm, let's say, in the middle, I don't know, around 160, I don't know what is the middle in this case, it needs to be this value. If it is 100, then if it is 306, it needs to be this. So let's go ahead and set that up. What we want to do is we want to update the property of this. And what we need to do is we need to use a condition called as set text. So I'm going to click on this handlebar over here. Let's click on this. Yeah, this is the handlebar over here. I'm going to close all of this. All right. Now what I will do is I'm still going to keep the print. All right. But I'm going to select all of these items. I'm going to press Command G to group them. All right. And so then I can just, hide them neatly. And this group is basically going to be the drag interaction. All right. Now I'm going to add a plus over here. And here, now this is going to be customizing or affecting other elements. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say set text. Okay. Oh, set text. All right. And the element that we want to target is this 100 that you see over here. I'm going to click on that. Okay. And I want it to be, right now it's put some random amount. I'm just going to reset all that. Reset all that. And I'm going to click on that. And I'm just going to choose the new position. So whatever is the new position that ends up getting calculated over here, that is going to do two things. One, it is going to set the position and it is also going to set the text over here. Now, in fact, what we can actually do is we can just take this and drag it over here because it's just one item. And then I can just ungroup this. All right. So now I think everything should be fine. Now let's see if this works. So I'm going to bring out my phone again. Now here, as you can see, now we have something that's happening over here. We've got a lot of weird stuff that's happening over here. But basically what's happening is that it's actually 78.299857, whatever it is, right? But as you can see, the math is working over here. So all I need to do is I just need to round off this number and set that. All right. So I can come here to set text and I'm going to say round off to the new position, whatever that value is. Oops. And I can close this, right? Now let's check this out again. So now I do this. Now you can see it is working, right? So now it ends at 306. The initial is 0 and it is working perfectly. But here's the problem. We need a value between 0 and 100. We don't need it to be exactly 306. All right. So how do we get that value over here? And this is again, super basic, simple math. So let's do this in Figma. Now, what I did was I just updated the value of this box to match our particular element. So the width of our handlebar is 84. So I did the same thing over here. And now we're going to do a basic cross multiplication. At least this is how I learned it in school. Maybe you guys learned it differently. But anyway, so if the value of 100, which is let's say 100 marks or 100 points, is 306 pixels. And 306 pixels is essentially this. All right. So if at this point the value is 100, what should be 50? And so here we basically need basic mathematical calculations. So that is 50 into 306 by 100. So for example, if we do 50 into 306 divided by 100, all right? So that gives us basically 153 pixels. So I'm going to go ahead and say equal to 153 pixels, all right? Now here, what should it be? So here we would do 50 into 356 by 100, which gives us 178. Now, essentially this makes sense, right? Because this screen area is wider, the value of 50 also should be more. But if you see the math, here it is actually 306 by 100, all right? If we do 306 by, let's do 306 by 100, that gives us 3.06. But here it is 356 by 100, which is 3.56. So again, depending on the screen width here, the math is supposed to change. So let's come back to play and set up that logic. So now the set text value is not going to be new position. We are still going to round off the value, but it's going to be something else. Now, what I want to do is I don't want to complicate things too much. And I don't want to change this set text value and new position and add a bunch of combinated things. What I will just do is I'll create a new variable to make it a lot easier. So the new position is still going to be whatever is that pixel value. So it can go up more than 100. But I'm going to create a new variable, call this number, and I'm going to go ahead and call this user answer. Okay. So now the user answer is basically going to end up over here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and set text. I'm going to change this from new position to, let's try that again, to user answer. Now we need to update this new answer. So after I set the position over here, all right, this is going to just drag the particular element left and right. I'm going to go ahead and add a new action, and I'm going to go ahead and call this set variable, where here we'll basically update that new number to reflect a value between 0 to 100. So I'm going to go ahead and say the user answer, we want that to be the new position, all right, divided by the screen width. All right, so I'm going to say device dot screen width, okay, minus the handlebar dot width, okay, and then I'm going to say divide this by 100, and then I can close the bracket on both sides. Okay, now let's just see if this works. This is basic math. So as you can see over here, now it is going to be within that limit. So if I move to the end, you can see it's going to be 100. If I move to the left, it's going to be 0. And if I come somewhere to the middle, which is around here, then it is around 50. And as you can see, it's in the middle, right? So now this is perfectly working. This is super cool. This is working phenomenal. Now the only thing here is when I start the animation. So if I go ahead and just reset this, let me just disable and enable. So it resets the animation. Here by default, we see it 100. So what I actually want to do at this point is I just want to go ahead and set this to be 0 opacity when it is nothing. And when I start dragging, I want to change the opacity, right? So what I will do is I'm going to come back here to the design mode, and I'm just going to click on this and set the opacity of this to be 0, all right? And when the interaction starts, which is essentially when I start the dragging, so if I open this up, this is where our dragging begins. The moment I start dragging, just change the value of that. So I'm going to set property of what? We want to update the opacity of the number here. So the answer box 100, set the opacity of that to 100%. All right. No need to animate. I just want it to quickly work super fast, and that should, really work. So let's check this out. So now by default, it's nothing. And the moment I start dragging, the number appears and everything works super well, and our interaction is working like a charm. All right, so that's how you go ahead and set up the drag interaction. And in the next video, we're going to go ahead and set up the logic to show the right and the wrong answer. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you did, let me know in the comment sections down below. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more amazing, awesome content. And I'll see you guys in my next video. So then, take care and bye-bye.